Captain's personal log. Stardate 12118.5. This was not what I had in mind when I ordered a size below extra large computer. End log. Yeah, this is Best of Trek, Worst of Trek. I'm your host, a Tellarite in a dress. Being reminded at number 614, Let It Burn, or Cold Fire. For the only time in Trek history, Majel reminds us what happened in the first episode of the series before the caretaker's remains start singing like a tea kettle in sickbay. They detect energy similar to the caretaker on a nearby space station that turns out to be inhabited by Ocampa like Kes. Their leader teaches Kes how to light things, including Tuvok, on fire. At the end of the episode, the caretaker's former mate tries to kill the crew because she thinks they killed the caretaker. When Janeway traps her and then shows her mercy, she leaves them alone and takes the Ocampa leader with her. The entrapment scene is one of the worst fights in all of Trek. Kes screams like a pig when Tuvok's face is on fire. Finding family at 613, Data's grandpa, or the Schizoid Man. The Enterprise answers the distress call of one of the Federation's most prominent scientists, who claims to have taught Data's creator Soong everything he knew, therefore making him Data's grandfather. The often mentioned but only seen here Dr. Salar diagnoses him with a terminal condition and he dies shortly thereafter. He actually used a recent invention to transfer his consciousness into Data, and the rest of the episode is Data acting strangely until he's made to see what he's doing through Data's body is wrong, and then transfers his knowledge, but not his consciousness, to the Enterprise computer. There's a funny moment in the intro where Data's got a beard like Riker's, and the original script called for him to have a bald head that looked like Picard, but was cut and never filmed. They sure like to introduce us to every person related to Data except a cousin. Running a con at number 612, plus 10 to luck, or Rivals. An Elorian runs several cons on DS9 before being temporarily held by Odo. While in the holding cell, his cellmate dies and he inherits a small toy that randomly gives you either a positive or a negative. He ends up conning a woman into helping him replicate the devices into larger gambling machines. For a while, he makes profit until it's discovered that the machines are actually changing the laws of probability of everything on the station so that unlikely things happen. Over time, though, the probabilities turn hard the other way, including in the machines themselves, and the legitimate businessman loses everything, including an investment he made when it turns out he himself was conned. The script was originally written with this character being Guinan's son, and she was going to show up and give him a stern talking to, but Whoopi Goldberg's schedule didn't allow for it, so the idea was scrapped, but the character is still an Elorian. Making little sense at 611, Aging Backwards, or Innocence. Tuvok crashes a shuttle on a moon where he finds a group of children who have also crashed. One by one, the kids slowly get taken, and they think it's a monster in a cave. Turns out it's just a society that ages in reverse, and these kids are really old folks that get sent here to be put out to pasture. In general, the society is xenophobic and kind of counterproductive to their own needs. The markings the makeup team used to make up this alien race look like mold-like fungus on their foreheads. Just a lazy nonsense episode. Ruining another trip to Risa at number 610. Worf goes to a Trump rally. Or let he who is without sin. Jadzia convinces Worf to take leave with her on Risa. They get broadsided by Bashir and Lita, who also want to go, and Quark blackmailing his way into the trip as well. We learn that Jadzia's last host died because of Jamaharon. Worf has trouble taking it easy and decides to attend a rally by a group calling themselves Essentialists that think the Federation has expanded too far and their ideals will lead to its downfall against powers like the Dominion. Worf goes so far as to help them gain control of the weather control station and revert Risa to the rain-soaked Florida swamp it really should be. When they use it to create earthquakes, Worf sees that he might have fallen into a cult and stops their plot to destroy all the buildings on the planet. This has been credited by many to be the worst episode of DS9. While it's certainly not great, it does have a message. The Essentialists aren't wrong about the Federation and its general population not being ready for a drawn-out bloody war, the likes of which the galaxy has never before seen. It also seems to carry more weight in a post-Donald Trump presidency, where this cycle of getting people to believe your cult-like views through fear is a very real thing we need to be mindful of. If you do not like and subscribe, I will be forced to wear this dress again. Trying to find honey at 6:09. Kirk's white whale. Or obsession. Every captain gets a chance to hunt their proverbial, or literal Moby Dick-style white whale. Kirk's may be the most bizarre because he sends his crew to die for a cloud that smells like honey? Apparently Kirk had encountered this entity more than a decade before and thought it was his fault people died because he hesitated. Now, a red shirt under his command that's the son of the dead captain from the original expedition made the same mistake and blames himself, along with Kirk kicking him while he's down. For once, McCoy and Spock agree on something and confront Kirk about his reckless actions to stay and fight this thing, and also about punishing the red shirt that made the same mistake he did 11 years prior. In the end, after disobeying orders to save lives on another planet, getting crew members killed for very little payoff, and chasing a thing they know little about, Kirk sets a trap for the entity and blows it up. As if the convoluted premise weren't bad enough, this one takes every opportunity to remind us that it's only a 15-minute script that's been stretched into a full runtime. Playing games at 6:08. The stage is set. Or hide and queue. This one is a quintessential Season 1 TNG episode that has precisely one thing going for it. The scene where Picard and Q are debating the merits of Shakespeare in the 24th century, it's really poignant and well thought out. Now back to our regularly scheduled waste of 1987. Q comes back to mess with Riker and other crew members in a Napoleonic game he's devised against some pig people. I'm not sure what it has to do with his true intentions of testing Riker to give him the powers of Q. Riker uses his newfound powers to send the crew back to the ship. They go on their merry way, and Picard asks him to refrain from using his powers. Though on their very next assignment, they find the body of a child in a colony they go to save. And Riker loses it because he's been asked not to use his powers, even though they could have saved the girl's life. In the end, he tries giving the bridge crew things they would like, before coming to the conclusion that he's been a fool. Which doesn't make sense to me. I don't think very many people, when given godlike powers, would think using them for the greater good would be foolish. In the end, Q agrees to never come back since he couldn't tempt Riker, but that only lasts one season, and he gets way better the next time we see him in Q Who, dressing up to be a clown at 6:07. The Doctor does opera. Or virtuoso. Voyager rescues a ship full of aliens from a mostly closed society that are more rude to the Doctor than his personality from Season 1. He starts singing while treating them, and somehow this race of advanced mathematicians have never heard music before. The rest of the episode is them clamoring over the Doctor and convincing him he should leave Voyager in favor of a career singing on their planet. Though in the end, he sees that fame is fleeting when one of the aliens programs a hologram that has more of a vocal range and makes him obsolete. This one's pretty mediocre, but we get a cameo from amazing actor and composer Paul Williams, funnily as a member of a race that doesn't know what music is. Losing itself at number 606. Hoshi disappears. or vanishing point. While exploring ruins on an uninhabited planet, Hoshi and Trip have to get an emergency transport out because of an extremely strong approaching storm. Trip beams up okay, but when Hoshi goes, she's very unsettled by her first transport. She goes to sickbay several times and tries to convince Phlox something's wrong. He doesn't find anything, and while working out in the gym, she can't pick anything up because she has no substance. She's glitched out of reality and no one can find her. She finds a group of aliens trying to blow up the ship and tries to stop them by following them through their transporter device, only to end up on Enterprise's transporter pad, very confused. Turns out she experienced most of the episode during her original transport, and it all amounts to a bad dream. While some of the episode is interesting, it's ultimately irrelevant. It just reinforces the Hoshi doesn't belong in space thread that exists through the first few seasons. Searching the Wrong Planet at number 605. Silent but Deadly. Or The Arsenal of Freedom. While looking for another Starfleet ship, the Enterprise finds a world devoid of life, but get an automated communication about buying weapons. When an away team beams down, they're greeted by some kind of destroyer drones. One puts Riker into a stasis field, and Picard decides he better beam down and take control of the away team, only to end up in a hole with Dr. Crusher, who breaks her leg. Geordi is left in command of the Enterprise for the only time in 7 seasons, and ends up separating the ship when they're attacked in orbit by a similar hostile. Picard finds the controls to these attack bots and makes a facetious play to buy weapons to call them off. The sand in the cave set Picard and Crusher were in had fleas in it, and it made filming very difficult and unpleasant for Patrick Stewart and Gates McFadden. Overall, an okay episode as far as Season 1 TNG goes. Evading Capture at 604. The Princess and the Trip. Or Precious Cargo. Yet another episode ranked by some as the worst episode of their particular series. I just don't see it. Trip is asked to fix a stasis pod on an alien ship. When it fully malfunctions, the woman inside comes to and Trip is knocked out and taken prisoner. At first, he has no universal translator and tries to convince the lady prisoner he's not her captor. Eventually, he rigs up his tricorder to bridge the language gap, and it turns out he's in the presence of royalty. She's not very helpful or impressed, but starts to come around to Trip's escape plan. Meanwhile, one of her captors was left on Enterprise when the other one took the ship and hightailed it out of there. Archer runs a successful bluff and makes him think T'Pol is a judge that will sentence him to something nasty if he doesn't cooperate and help find his ship. Trip gets some good character development when he puts up with the needy princess in an escape pod built for one for a whole day before crashing into Florida Man's home, a swamp planet. They roll around exacerbated with each other before getting down on an emotional kiss. Eventually, her captor and Archer both find them, and everything turns out alright. Seeing the universe through the eyes of Florida Man is always worth some points in the rankings.
Ah, computer.
That program is available.
Thanks, Majel. Majel. Thanks, Majel.
10 months ago, the crew of Voyager was pulled into the Delta Quadrant by an entity known as the Caretaker.
Thanks, Majel.
Current location, 10 forward.
Majel.
Well, what's with the captain?
Thanks, Majel.
Now, if you don't follow his orders, Dr. McCoy could, and possibly would, have you hauled down to sickbay and fed intravenously.
Thanks, Majel.
Applying psychology?
Thanks, Majel.
Still unconscious, sir.
Majel.
In the